Welcome back, everyone, to Nuts and Bolts Sports. Raj and Jordan, and he was so great last week. We had to bring him back immediately. Henry is back joining us here today, talking about the NBA. Let's just dive right into it because we've got a lot to discuss. There's games going on right now. There's a big game here in just about an hour or so, and I know Henry wants to get off of here in time to catch that one. Let's start with kind of what's on top of everybody's minds today, and that would be the Danuel House situation, and we can kind of use that to lump in the Lakers, and Jordan can get his vent or whatever he wants to talk about in there. But obviously, we found out, I think it was last night actually, that he was not playing. He had not played, and then he's not going to play in Game 4. And we were like, "What's going on here?" And we found out that apparently he let somebody into his room that was not supposed to be in his room. Basically violating the protocols of the bubble. Original reports are saying it was one of the COVID testers. There's not been any confirmation about that. I'm excited to see which reporter beats the other to the expose piece, whether it's Woj or Shams or whatever comes first. This thing's wild, and it's kind of funny because like we were so close to making it to like a flawless bubble, and then this thing just all kind of comes crashing down. And it's not a significant player by any means, but it puts a lot of significant players at risk in that series between Westbrook, Harden, James, Davis. It's a pretty major situation, even though fingers crossed it looks like nobody's been affected by it. Henry, I'll toss it to you first. What are your sort of thoughts seeing this whole thing unravel over the past 24 hours?
I'll be honest, I thought it was hilarious. I think it's very funny because this is a subject that Stephen A. Smith brought up when the bubble was progressing. He was like, he's the one that brought it up at first. He was like, oh, these players, they need their girlfriends or their wives are just like, they need a +1 because yada, yada, yada. Like, and then he started like alluding to certain things. And we all knew what he was talking about. So then when Danuel House did that, when I first saw the reports, I was like, you know what? Stephen A was right. This was kind of predictable. Bad side for the Rockets, but at the end of the day, I don't think you can afford to make stupid mistakes like that. You guys are in a bubble. You're gonna get caught. Like I don't understand like what went through his head exactly. But Jordan, please give me your thoughts on this unique and weird topic.
Yeah, it's I mean it is funny like in spurts, don't get me wrong, like it is comical that like that's what's going to get you, like you made it this far and that's what kind of stops you in the bubble. But at the same time, as like I was talking about on Twitter, it's got to be frustrating if you're a Houston Rocket player. I mean, he's not a superstar by any means, but D'Antoni only generally plays about 8, maybe 9 guys, especially in the playoffs. He tightens that rotation, and House was a pretty big part of that. Somebody who could space the floor, probably they're statistically one of their best 3-point shooters, and just another body that could give Westbrook and Harden some rest on the bench. So if you're those guys, you got to be pretty frustrated. I mean, don't get me wrong, I get it. It's a very unique situation. Everyone's in the bubble, away from family, friends, other things that they enjoy doing on a daily basis. But at the end of the day, that's your job. Like you're getting paid to be there. You're getting paid very well to be there, and to break that code and those ground rules that were very clear and very set forth from day one is pretty disrespectful. I don't know what Houston is going to do. I did look up. He does have another 2 years on his contract. It's only about $3 to $4 million per year. So would they look to potentially trade him? Would they look to release him? I'm not sure. But I feel like something has to be done, even if it's like a suspension by the team next year, whenever that new season is. I feel like he does have to be punished because at the end of the day, he did hurt his team a lot. And while they maybe weren't going to win the series with or without him, it's just kind of like the ethics of it that, he's really letting his teammates down.
Yeah, what was, I guess, most shocking to me was the fact that this is like coming, I think the report came in September 8th originally to the league when they found out about it before we started to find out about it. And, this is just a week or so after families were allowed to enter the bubble. So like, did he just not have anybody and he was feeling lonely because everybody else had somebody like around their arm or whatever, and he was just like, I need somebody to keep me company here, so he called in one of the healthcare workers or whatever it may be. I don't know, it is very weird. Jordan, I'm glad you bring up the point about his contract because it does introduce a sort of weird conundrum for Houston where this is an anomaly. We're not going to get anything like this ever again. Maybe I know this bubble situation sort of on the fence for next year. But how does Houston go about this? Did you have anything in mind? Because I know you're talking about the possibility of them, finding him or whatever. Is that what you think is most appropriate? Did you have any other thoughts on it?
I mean, it's tough. I'm sure Houston's kind of in the same spot we all are, trying to process the news and figure out like what their next step is. Yeah, I think releasing him is kind of tough, although I think it would be what's fair for him for breaking that code and everything. But at the same time, like they're already in salary cap trouble, so cutting a guy for $3.5 million is just a waste. So if they can find some other team that's willing to give him something, maybe. But if I know personally, like if I was D'Antoni, if I was Daryl Morey, the GM, or like even Harden or Westbrook, I would personally be like, this guy's got to go. Like it's ridiculous. Like we're looking at James Harden, who is like Mr. Strip Club himself, and he's been by all accounts very good in the bubble. So yeah, it's just very frustrating. But I would say probably trade would be more likely than cut. But we'll see. Obviously, as we know, the NBA is in flux, trying to figure out when the draft's going to be, when the season's going to start. So as we get more information about that, I think that'll determine what Houston does.
Henry, you got any thoughts on what you think is the most appropriate punishment for this?
I mean, he's not going to play the next game. He didn't play the last game. I think I don't know, in terms of what the Rockets can do moving forward after this, it was very irresponsible from Danuel House. I mean, I think he knew the circumstances and the consequences of his actions, but he just didn't care. And I thought you brought up a pretty good point, Raj. He felt lonely. I mean, I don't know, but I think this is the most I've ever heard NBA players talk about mental health during the season. And it kind of shows, like there are people too, they get lonely too. And like you said, like Kyle Lowry's family's there. You see a bunch of wives or girlfriends or plus ones. And I guess he didn't have that plus one. So, I guess he got in desperation mode. But moving forward for the Rockets, if they decided to release him or trade him, get something out of him, that's very doable, but I don't think that's the necessary consequence. I think just suspending him for the rest of the series is fine. Staying with the team, I think that's appropriate as well. I don't think this was too much of a wrong thing to trade him or to get rid of him, but that's up to the front office. So.
No, yeah, the mental health conversation is certainly important, and it is good that these guys are opening up about that. And in all seriousness, like, we are having a little bit of fun and jabbing at him and whatnot. But if that is the case, then, that while it's not appropriate for him to go and make that decision and make that call, you kind of understand his headspace and where he is and why he's making that decision. So that's certainly on the table there. And we can use this to sort of just talk about the game yesterday as well, because Houston going down 3-1, looking like the Lakers are going to most likely close it out tomorrow night. Anthony Davis showing up big for the Lakers. I know there was still a few defensive lapses and whatnot with the team as a whole, not just Anthony Davis. LeBron, putting up okay numbers, not given the best game that he had overall. But they did a good job of containing Harden and Westbrook for the most part. Those guys were jacking up a lot of shots too, and they were missing some wild shots as well. It was kind of an ugly game, if I'm being completely honest with you. I was not having much fun watching that one. Jordan, why don't you start us off? What were you kind of feeling, headspace and whatnot, throughout these four quarters?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the way they closed it out, I think, has to be talked about. It was very poor. The ultimate, combination of being lazy, probably looking ahead to the next game, feeling like they had done their job most of the game. So that was pretty frustrating to watch those last couple of minutes. However, you do have to give the Lakers credit. They came out with a lot of energy on both ends of the floor, just really pretty much dominated almost start to finish. LeBron, while he didn't maybe shoot as well as he has in some of the other games, was still doing his usual distributing, getting to the rim. Your buddy Anthony Davis had another pretty decently solid game. He's still taking too many fadeaway jumpers, but was a little more assertive. And then they just continued to they're really getting some consistent contributions off the bench. I mean, Rondo was 11, 10, and 8 on 5 of 8 shooting. Caruso had a playoff career high 16 points, including what would end up being the dagger 3 with about 35, 40 seconds left. They made what I thought was the great move to not play JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard at all and start Markieff Morris. And while I've been joking about it, like all series, like that really was the move. It's not like we don't have precedent. We've seen this with, the Warriors are the ones that started this in 2015 by sitting Bogut and doing that their, lineup of death there. The Lakers obviously don't have the quite same pieces, but the idea was to just match up with Houston, especially on defense, and be able to switch everything. And you saw that there was a lot more fluid switching. The ability to double Harden was much easier because you had guys that could move around instead of JaVale and Dwight, who are just much more slow-footed. So I thought that was much improved as well. Danny Green and Caldwell Pope hit their outside shots. Like everyone was much better. Even Horton Tucker came in the game and gave us a quick 5 points. So it was for the I was very frustrated with the last 3 or 4 minutes or so, but for the first 43, 44 minutes, they played very well. Harden. he stunk again. That's going to be on his hall. He's going to make the Hall of Fame. He's going to be almost probably a first ballot, given his overall numbers and stuff. But that's going to be the first thing everybody thinks of is like great regular season numbers, and just doesn't get it done in the playoffs. I mean, you can't sit here and tell me that if you rank the top 10 guys in the league, Harden's going to be in there somewhere. But would you pick any of the other guys to go 2 for 11? With just 21 points and 5 turnovers in what essentially was a must-win game for Houston.
And most of those points came at the free throw line. We should point out he was absolutely atrocious from the field.
Yeah, it was terrible. And 2 of 11 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3. You shouldn't be taking just 11 shots in a do or die playoff game. I don't care how many free throws you took. You're the best player on your team. You should be taking 15 to 20 or 25 shots a game. But I just can't imagine LeBron, Durant, Dame Lillard. I can't imagine any of those guys in a must-win game flopping like that. But it's the trend with Harden. And as fun as it is to make fun of him, it's kind of frustrating because you see this guy with a lot of talent, and it just seems like whether it's mentally, whether it's physically, we have this debate every year whether he's tired. I don't know what it is, but if you're a Rockets fan, you have to be really just frustrated at this point that he keeps pulling this out. But bottom line is, knock on wood here, the Lakers are looking at hopefully a win on Saturday, looking at the potential, the holy war that we predicted at the beginning of the year, which was Lakers-Clippers, as the Clippers are up 12 at half as well. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be interesting. I don't know who I'm going to pick as of right now, but we'll find that out Monday. But good win for the Lakers overall, and we'll see what happens Saturday.
Yeah, Henry, what you got on this full series? And then, if you want to hone in on last night's game as well, but we haven't really heard a whole lot of your thoughts on the way this series has progressed over the past week. So I want to get your overall thoughts on this matchup between the Lakers and the Rockets, and then kind of discuss last night's game as well.
Well, I kind of want to discuss that the Lakers have kind of a trend. They lose that game 1. They put the whole Lakers fan base, just on a spiral. But then just moving forward, they seem to figure themselves out. LeBron is playing LeBron basketball. He's been dunking the ball like 2009 LeBron James, and that's a scary sight to see. I know there's some moves he did that it caught me off guard, especially him being 35 years of age in his 17th season. The Lakers last game, they had 6 players in double figures. James Harden had the most inefficient 21 points I've ever seen. Like at the end of the game, it's like, okay, you ended up with 21 points, but how? I'm doing 11 shooting and everything, but I think that's just a testimony to Rockets basketball. Me and Jordan were talking about this, that just seeing the Rockets play kind of makes me uncomfortable. Now, their system is exposed. PJ Tucker played well, very, very well in game 1. Last game, he had 0 points, 3 rebounds. I think he finally got exposed, playing against players like Anthony Davis and Markieff Morris that are just a lot more physical than him. Honestly, I think the Rockets are done. And I think we can just look forward to that Lakers-Clippers matchup that's been, in everybody's head as the season continued, because it looks like that's what we're coming down to. Each team leads their series 3-1. Each team most likely going to win their series. I don't really see the Rockets coming back from 3-1 and pulling a Denver Nuggets in round 1. Can you guys see that? I'm pretty sure not. Yeah, not at all. Especially the way that Russell Westbrook and James Harden are shooting the ball. They're just, at this point, they're just chucking up shots. Last game, they look like they already gave up. I mean, their recovery and just them getting back on defense, it was poor basketball effort on their end. I don't really blame Mike D'Antoni too much, even though his system is very, very flawed as well. But the Rockets I think they just gotta look to the offseason now. I mean, what offseason moves can they make? They got Westbrook, they got Harden. Do they get rid of Mike D'Antoni? I think there was reports saying that he's going to come back next season, regardless of a win or a loss. Sure. But what other piece can they give the Rockets in order to make sure they're not a second round, first round exit? I think that's a huge question they're going to answer. But honestly, in my opinion, Jordan knows this. I hate the Lakers, but I can see him just easily winning Game 5 and moving on to the Western Conference Finals for the first time since, was it 2010? For the first 2010. 10 years in the making.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what you thought the sort of next steps for Houston's offseason are, because the D'Antoni situation is a bit up in the air because his contract's expiring. And if D'Antoni does stay there, I just see a lot of players being hesitant to go to Houston, sign with Houston. They can obviously trade for guys, but I don't see any free agents being attracted there because they're not going to get a lot of touches, first off, with Harden and Westbrook handling a lot of the ball. But also, D'Antoni's system is so inflexible. He's like Budenholzer in the fact that he doesn't like to change up his lineup and his structure, and he goes into every team kind of with the same mindset and does the same thing over and over and over again. Do either of you have any sort of ideas as to what Houston can actually do? Jordan, you're raising your hand. What you got?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of a combo of what they have. I mean, like I said, we talked about this, I think, about a week ago. You can't really trade Harden, although I think it'd be interesting to just like make a couple phone calls just to see like what the market is.
It seems like the most it's not going to happen, but it seems like the most logical decision at this point for Houston.
Yeah, exactly. And, because you can't really trade Russ. I feel like at this point, as much as I like Russ's competitiveness, like, what he is as a player and you're going to get, and it's not going to work. But the problem is they don't have a ton of other assets. They don't have, a lot of other, great players. Like no one's going to be making calls on Daniel. Like there are going to be a lot of guys calling me like, hey, her Danuel House is available. Like, what do you want?
At this point, I don't think any team is really looking for Danuel House.
or like any of those guys, like whoever's under contract, the Jeff Greens, the Ben McLemores, like they're all journeymen that, like, to Houston's credit, has been able to mold into serviceable players. Yeah. But I think the two biggest things, and you hit the nail on the head with the free agents not really wanting to come there. This isn't like a LeBron or a situation, or like a maybe Durant in Brooklyn. Like you're not going to see guys just willingly flock there for a chance at a ring because it hasn't been proven that they can win it all.
Not even close. They can't get out of the second round. Yeah.
So you're not going to see guys taking massive discounts like they did with LeBron and they would do with like Durant, some other teams. And the other thing too is D'Antoni has to go. I wish there was a way I could make a bet that Mike D'Antoni will never win a title as a head coach for the rest of his NBA career. I don't care what the odds are. Take my entire bank account, toss it on the bet, because it's not going to happen. I've never once been worried about it. Even when they pushed the Warriors to 6 and 7 games a couple of years, then there was extenuating circumstances that allowed those series to go that deep that were beyond the Warriors' control. I was never that worried. It just doesn't happen. He doesn't, like you said, he doesn't make a lot of adjustments, and it just turns into Harden, doing isolation for 20 seconds, shooting a bad three. Westbrook, as we saw all game last night, taking 20 footers with 18 seconds left on the shot clock, and that's all it's going to be. And if they bring back most of the same team next year, it's going to be the same thing. So if I'm Daryl Morey, I'm never sure he's crunching the numbers already, but I would just look to get rid of D'Antoni, find someone who could maybe bring in some more defensive-minded players, because they don't really have a lot of good defenses either. They thrived. Their defensive numbers were good in the bubble because, again, it's a gimmick. Teams aren't like ready for it. They haven't been used to it. There's not a lot of film on it. So they were able to kind of fly around, have Tucker at center, get some steals. But Russ is only going to get his athleticism is only going to fall off the rest of his career. Harden is never going to be any better of a defender than he has been the last year or two. Tucker's only getting older, and that's it. Like other than that, you have Ben McLemore, Danuel House, Jeff Green. Like those are guys that are going to get chewed up by. It doesn't matter if it was the Clippers, the Lakers, even the Nuggets would have had some success against them with Jokic. Like they would have had a field day with all those guys. So they have a lot of work to do. It starts on defense, and it starts with the head coach.
Some of those pieces too, like Jeff Green is going to be a free agent this summer too, so they'd have to sign him, and he played well. So if they want to sign him, they're probably going to have to give him a little bit of money. Do they even have enough money to give him? It's a complete shit show in Houston, if we're being completely honest, and it kind of does suck to see it. Henry, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, Jordan, are you kind of making it clear to Houston right now to just blow up the team, to trade Harden? I mean, the only time with Houston that he actually made it to the conference finals was back in 2015 against the Warriors. We all saw what happened there. But out of his 7 years with the franchise, that's been his biggest accomplishment. So does he waste another 7 years, or does he, give it another 5 years? What's going to happen there? I think Houston, virtually, they're ready to move on. I don't know if I could be wrong on that. They can still hold on to Harden because he has a lot more to prove. I mean, this last season, he averaged 35 points for a reason. But if they're finding no results and no productivity out of that, heading into the playoffs, I think Houston's best bet is to get rid of Mike D'Antoni. I agree with you 100%. Great coach, solid coach, but he's never going to win a championship. Then with the Lakers, the Rockets doing a mediocre job in a way. His system is just way too flawed. So I don't see the Rockets really holding on to him. And really, maybe just one more season with Harden. They're going to experiment. But then afterwards, I don't see James Harden really being a Houston Rocket much longer during his career. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and the other thing, we've talked about the coaching situation. If they do get rid of D'Antoni, there's not really that many great coaches on the market too. So like, what do they do? They can't get any better, I don't think, in the coaching department.
Chauncey Billups is on the market. Who
Yeah,
else?
but he's looking at Indiana, so that
Yeah.
looks like that could be a done deal. We talked about Kenny Atkinson last week, but I
Mhm.
don't see Kenny Atkinson going to a place like Houston. Who else is on the market? I mean, unless you go
Tyronn
after
Lue.
Tyronn. I don't like Tyronn Lue, so I'm
Dude,
a captain. I do
I don't
not
know.
like Tyronn Lue. So
I'm pretty sure players have a bad stigma around him just because I don't think he's really very very well respected as a head coach, and I kind of feel bad for that guy. I mean, we all saw the way he was treated in Cleveland. He looked like he was the sixth man,
yeah,
in a LeBron team. So, um, kudos to Steve Nash on getting his first head coaching position. It just goes to show, I think the head coaching game now can go either way. Do you need experience as a head coach to be a head coach in the NBA now? How much credit, or is it more on credibility as a basketball player? Like, there's
sure.
just so many like dynamics that go
There's so
into it
many
now.
factors too. Yeah,
Mhm.
there's one name that comes to mind. I don't know if I think he is on the market. One of you guys can follow up and confirm for me. Dave Yeager, who was with Memphis a few
Mhm.
years ago, and then he's on the market still.
Yeah.
Okay, so he would be actually a decent fit there because we know he's a good defensive coach. I know he didn't really excel in Memphis, but that's because he kept running into teams like Golden State. And I think that he could bring a sort of interesting dynamic to this Houston team that could maybe change up what they have. There's no other names that come to mind right now that I think that would be a good fit there. Either of you have any thoughts on Yeager as a pick?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like any change is good at this point. The Rockets they're stuck in that rut that you kind of saw. Other teams, especially you see a lot of times the teams in the East, like that, like the
Really?
Pistons and
You talking about Philadelphia? You talking about Philadelphia again?
no, not even them. Just like other teams that have been like stuck in mediocrity. And like, don't get me wrong, like I say mediocrity, but Houston's won like 50 to 56 plus games, like even 60 games once. Like they have been putting up regular season numbers, but they are completely stuck in a rut. I don't see a future where they get any better. So when you're at that point, and especially in the NBA, you almost have to blow it up. And I know, as a GM, if I told Darren Moore that, he'd be like, I'm not trading my best player. I'm not trading Westbrook, like, because they believe in it. But at the same time, if you don't see yourself going anywhere, you have to make, some kind of move. And obviously, like with a guy like Harden, it'd be pretty tough to think of something. I would say this. If the phone rings and Darren Moore picks it up and it is Elton Brand in Philly, and he says, hey, I have two guys here. I have Simmons and Embiid. I'm probably looking to get rid of Embiid, and you could definitely use a center based on the series I just watched. Like, could there be something there? I don't know. It'd be interesting. Like, those talks are unrealistic, but it'd be interesting because, like, I feel like that you have guys around the league that definitely need to change the scenery, and if you could just pair two of them together, I think anything's possible.
Yeah, we've seen that happen in the past few years with so many of these pair ups, the kind of duo that we're seeing in the league now, the wave that's taken over. I don't even know if that is a good fit, for either of those two teams. And do either of those teams have the right packages to make that deal happen? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But let's go ahead and move into sort of the other highlight of tonight. And I'll let Henry take the baton and run with it first, since, this is his team. Game seven here, Boston versus Toronto. Toronto pushing it after that double overtime victory. Kind of a wild finish to that game. I think a lot of us would agree. What are your thoughts on the ending of that game? What are you expecting from your team tonight?
I think the refs are doing a horrible job. Honestly, I think in an unbiased standpoint too, not even just as a Celtics fan, they confirmed it after the game that when Kemba Walker went for the game-winning layup, that he was fouled on that play. And then I saw the ref that was right in front of him. It looked like he was looking through Kemba Walker. At that point, I'm like, I don't know what's going on in the bubble. It's just so many weird things have been going on, but I think Sam Foster is reffing tonight, and he's probably the most hated ref in the NBA. So we'll see what happens there. Kudos to Toronto for coming back. To put it into a little perspective, I found a crazy stat. No team has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit in the playoff series. Every team is 0 and 139 in those attempts. But teams to come back from 2-0, 27 teams have been successful. So OG Anunoby's shot at the end of game 3 skyrocketed their chances to win this series by, I don't know the percentage, but those 0.5 seconds changed the entire series, because now look at this. We're in a game 7. We saw Jason Tatum. He didn't play well down the stretch. I mean, we saw the way he threw the ball away to Daniel Tice when he was in the corner. He just straight threw it to Mike Dant um, God, his name just flew out of my head right now.
Nick Nurse.
To Nick Nurse. Which Nick Nurse was standing on the sideline. Did you guys see that? He was actually standing on the court, and that's a violation right there. So there's a lot of things that these refs are missing. And I'm not saying I'm blaming the refs on the losses or anything. That not even Jason Tatum could blame Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens is doing an amazing job, but just the execution down the floor. Kemba Walker, he's not playing like Cardiac Kemba. He's not playing like the UConn or the Charlotte Hornets Kemba. He's playing like a Kemba Walker. He seems so cold down the stretch that I don't want the ball in his hands. Every time I see the ball in his hands, I see him as a liability now, especially on defense. He gets beat by Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet so easily. And also props to Fred VanVleet. That man is balling. Again, as a Celtics fan, I'm being unbiased there. Him and Kyle Lowry are playing amazing basketball. Kudos to them. But to win Game 7, Jason Tatum needs to play like the Jason Tatum that went head-to-head with LeBron back in 2018. That man was absolutely fearless. But for some reason, Fred VanVleet looks like he puts more fear in him than to a rookie Jason Tatum than LeBron. So there's a lot of things to really I'm frustrated. I'll be honest. I am super frustrated. But Game 7 is Game 7. Jordan brought this up before the live stream that Game 7s, both teams tend to get very, very cold. We saw that with
Denver and Utah. 78 final score. Yeah.
Exactly. So efficiency is going to go down, but it always takes that one player and it always takes that one bad call to change the entire game. So I'm curious to see. I literally got my money on Boston, so I'm stressing even a lot more right now. But so far, I don't know. What do you guys think on that?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. The stuff that you brought up is kind of the stuff like you hit like almost every point that Jordan and I have been touching on over the past week or so. And that's like, first off, Kemba, is he going to be good? Is he not going to be good? When he struggles, the Celtics are not going to win, and he has been struggling. So that's been a sign there. You also, we talked about VanVleet and Lowry being not great in the first couple games, and that's why they lost. Those two have bounced back in this series and have been much better in the back half of the series than they started off. And then, Jason Tatum being the sort of final factor of that that trifecta of things that we've been touching on a lot. And it does come down to Jason Tatum elevating to superstar status here the way he did against LeBron a couple of years ago that we saw back when they faced Cleveland. And that is what it's going to take tonight. In Game 7s, oftentimes the team with the better player does end up winning because that is the kind of player that can take over when a lot of these other role players, bench players, whatever it may be, get stiff, get cold, and they can't hit shots in a big game, in a high pressure situation. That is what it's coming down to here, and I think that is going to be the key tonight. Jaylen Brown has also stepped up here. He's had a couple good games after having a couple bad games, so that's going to be another sort of key to watch. I would say those are my two players that I have my eye closest on. Also, it seems like we've been talking about the way that Giannis was figured out on the Bucks. It seems like a team has figured out how to basically break down Pascal Siakam, and he's not a sort of all-star player that we expected him to be here in these playoffs. He's been struggling quite a bit, so that's another thing that I'm gonna have to keep my eye on for sure. What do you got to add to that, Jordan? You're muted.
Sorry, I don't want to hear you. Have you guys hear my breathing while you guys are talking? I will circle back to Henry's first point about the Kemba Walker, the foul that the refs, the 2-minute report came out and admitted was wrong. You know how you avoid that? You don't have Kemba Walker take like one of the last shots in your game. They have Jaylen Brown and Tatum, who are two fantastic wings, capable of getting their own shots. And for the life of me, for like as fun as that game was to watch, it was fun to watch for like the pure effort that guys like Lowry and Brown and Smart were just like, playing almost every minute, giving it all out. But I thought from like a pure talent and like execution point, it was a pretty crappy end of the fourth and overtime. I could not believe that they had like Kemba Walker taking shots. Toronto rested their chances on winning the game in regulation in overtime on Norman Powell. You had Marcus Smart trying to take a game-winning three. Like, I don't get it. When it comes down to it in the playoffs, the best guys need to get the ball, and everyone needs to basically clear out and get out of the way for these guys. So I hope we see some of that tonight. I was pretty baffled that Nurse and Brad Stevens, who are two of the smartest coaches in this league, decided to go some of the routes that they did in Game 6. With that being said, I think this is going to be a really tight game. I think it's going to be very low scoring. Like Henry and I talked about, I think teams get really tight in Game 7. Plus the fact that I think both of these teams can really step it up defensively. We have so many great defenders across the board. That's going to be tough. The key for Boston is going to be what guy besides Tatum and Brown step up. And the answer is no. I don't think it's Kemba. So I think it's going to have to be somebody off the bench. And they're not playing a lot of guys. They're playing Ojale, Grant Williams, Robert Williams, and Wanamaker. So it's probably going to have to be a guy like Wanamaker who's going to have to come in, be efficient, play good defense, and create some opportunities for some other guys. You have to imagine Tatum and Brown are going to show up. Although Tatum has had, for every good couple of possessions he's also had some not so good ones. Like Henry alluded to, he's not quite playing as fearless as he did maybe in 2018 as a rookie. So we'll need to see if he can step up. This is probably, I would say, arguably, other than that Game 7 against LeBron, probably the biggest game of his career. And then on the Toronto side, we'll see what happens. Van Fleet, I know, is going to be a big time player. He's going to show up. And Lowry, for the most part, has been playing well this series, although I'm not the biggest Kyle Lowry fan. But I think it's something interesting for them is they have a lot of veterans, right? They have Ibaka, they have Marcus Gasol, these guys that have been around in the playoffs for a lot of years. I'm really interested to see, can one of those two guys muster up one of those gritty, whether it's if it's a 15.9 rebound, hit a couple of big three performances, nothing flashy, but can one of those two just use their veteran knowledge of being in big games and step up? I think that's going to be the big difference for Toronto. If I had to pick a team, I think what Raj said is right with having the better player. The best player in the series generally does it. So I'm going to go with Boston. I think it's going to be really close. I could see it being down to the wire. I also kind of want a Boston-Miami 7-game series. So
Nobody, I guarantee you right now, nobody wants to see a Raptors Heat series. Or am I wrong about that? No.
Only Raptors fans.
So, we'll see. I think it'll come down to that. I think, that's what I talked about at the beginning of the series. I said one of the keys for Boston was when it gets down to crunch time, can Tatum take over? Can he show us that he's a true superstar? And I think tonight is the ultimate test, and we're going to see what happens. We'll see what happens. I got Boston by 4.
Okay. I want to follow up on that point on Ibaka and Gasol, because neither of those guys have shown us this season they have what it takes to step it up, and I don't think being in the playoffs right now changes that. I think maybe if this was last season, that we would have seen that. We saw Gasol do it a few times last year. We even saw Ibaka have pretty big games in the playoffs. So that, I think, is a pretty important factor here, and I think those guys are just a little bit too far past where they should be.
I hope one of them goes off tonight. I'll be in your Twitter DMs.
But I have to agree with you. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it's going to be an ugly game. It's going to be low scoring, but I think Boston is going to pull it out. What you got, Henry? Close us out here.
You guys know what I'm going to say right now. I got Boston winning this game. But I can see the Raptors putting up, quite a fight. I can see it being very, very low scoring, low efficient game. Very gritty. I can see Marcus Smart just throwing himself, at any loose ball he sees. Obviously, we see that from him a lot, but I think he's gonna, level that up this game, especially going against also other hustle players like Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet that are essentially able to do the same for Marcus Gasol and Serge Ibaka. I think that's an interesting point because they have so much playoff experience. Ibaka with the Oklahoma City Thunder, Marcus Gasol with the Memphis Grizzlies. If they're able to play the way they did with those teams, then Boston is done. Our big men still need to step it up. Daniel Tice, he's been solid recently, but he can be a huge liability. Fred VanVleet seems to beat him off the dribble every single time. So the mismatch is there. I don't think Nick Nurse is going to go to Norman Powell for a game winner anymore. But I remember, well, that's something really quick I wanted to bring up. What do you guys think of that? I thought I don't know if he was in panic mode or I don't know if that play was set up for him specifically, but we all know Nick Nurse is smarter than that of who to put the ball in the hands for a game winner. Norman Powell, if he hit that, then I would have been even more devastated because I would not expect that. But in terms of the coaching side, we know what Brad Stevens is capable of. Nick Nurse is the coach of the year. This is a coaching matchup too. They're both young. They're both now gaining all that playoff experience. When it comes to the coaching matchup, who do you guys think is gonna outwit one another? Is it gonna be Brad Stevens or is it gonna be Nick Nurse?
I think that Brad Stevens is among the top 3 coaches in the league. And I know we were sort of praising Nick Nurse from this season. I think a lot of that contributes to the fact that he lost Kawhi and kept that team afloat, and that's why I thought he was so deserving of Coach of the Year. I don't necessarily know if he's at Brad Stevens' level yet. But Brad Stevens has also hit a lot of roadblocks in his playoff runs with the Celtics, and he does need to eventually get over the hump, or he's going to be in a similar situation to somebody like a Budenholzer, where he's just not really getting his team where they need to be. And even though they are young guys, he could be in trouble. I think Brad Stevens is the better coach of the two, so that sort of also adds to the my reasoning as to why I think Boston is going to pull out here.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be. That's a good point that I forgot to bring up earlier. Who's going to make the better in-game adjustments? If player X comes out and starts hitting shots early, are they going to switch defenders? Are they going to switch how they defend that person with double teams and ices and stuff like that? It'll be interesting to see who can do that. I will say, for fun, if it comes down and it's tied, can we just not? Because overtime, like I said, it was fun, but at the same time, it was really sloppy. So if it comes down to it and it's tied, we can either do a face-off between the coaches where they have to make the craziest facial expressions, which means Nick Nurse is going to win because he's a meme every time. He's like, or what I think my personal favorite would be a flop-off between Marcus Smart and Kyle Lowry. I think that would.
That's a good.
You talk about like Hall of Fame level flopping. Like, I don't think either of those guys should make the Hall of Fame, but I think for flopping their first ballot.
I think then I still have to take Boston because I think Marcus Smart has the edge. What do you got, Henry?
Up the youth.
Game 7, we all know how that plays out. We just talked about how the efficiency is going to go down. We've seen that with prior games and prior series. Marcus Smart, Kyle Lowry, they're flop artists, and I don't think the refs are going to help in that situation because the officiating in this bubble has been absolutely horrible. So honestly, there's just so many things that are going to unfold. Honestly, we could be wrong about all this too. This could probably be their most efficient game on both ends, where they both end up scoring 120, 130, becoming one of those games because it's just so competitive. But at the same time, Kemba Walker, he needs to be that number one option. We got him for Kyle Lowry for a reason because he is that all-star level. The Athletic just posted an article about him that says he's the most normal superstar in the NBA, if that makes sense. I'm like, it makes sense.
Superstar stretch.
Yeah, I saw the word superstar. I was like, you know what? I'm a Celtics fan, but I don't think he's at that superstar level just yet. Jason Tatum needs to play like that. Oh my God, he's only 19, 20 years old. Jason Tatum, that everybody's always talking about, posting that same meme and everything. Jaylen Brown has been these last couple games, he's been able to step it up because, like you mentioned, Raj, he had some pretty horrible games. Had a game where he went 2 of 11 from 3. That was not a pretty sight to see from Jaylen Brown, who's progressively become a better 3-point shooter throughout his career. Daniel Tice needs to stop playing like a slow Daniel Tice that gets beat off the dribble so easily. He ends up becoming a huge liability on defense. And we need to stop Norman Powell because he can ball too. He's just dropping 15-plus points. We can't allow that. I don't understand how he's able to penetrate Boston's defense so much. I mean, he had a clutch 3 last time. He's a shooter. As much as I do hate Toronto, they're very versatile. Someone brought it up. I think it was Jordan. They're a very boring team to watch, essentially. But it's going to be interesting. Like I said, we could be wrong. We could be right. I'm still sweating it. So that's not
usually wrong.
Jordan's wrong like 96% of the time. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us, Henry. That'll bring us to a close for this episode. Be sure to find all our social. I can't do this anymore. I have to go like 3.
Wait, Raz, real quick. I don't mean to cut you off. Do you want to highlight what the Grizzlies did today, real quick?
Yeah.
I feel like out of respect.
No, thank you for pointing that out. That almost slipped my mind. Yeah, let me pull up her name real quick. I believe it was Sonia Rahman.
Sonia Rahman.
Yeah, Rahman.
Yeah.
So they hired. She is the women's basketball coach from MIT, and the reason that this excited me is because it's an Indian woman being signed to a pro NBA coaching staff. She's going to be an assistant with the Grizzlies. And that just really excited me because there's not a lot of Indian people in the NBA to begin with. That there's a couple guys like deep in the benches of a couple teams, like OKC has one there. But to see, a woman and then also to see an Indian person joining the bench and being an assistant coach for a team,
very cool.
That's really exciting. And thanks for bringing that up because that is pretty cool to see. And we're taking strides. I'm one step closer to my dreams right now. But yeah, be sure to follow Nuts and Bolts Sports on all our social medias as well as our blog. And also, we'll be back here on Monday. We're going to be having Henry back probably pretty soon, so just keep an eye out. This might become a trio real soon. But thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll be